Hello there and welcome to another Combat Patrol video. However, this one's going to be more of a paint guide rather than a usual Combat Patrol video, because we're going to look at the Primiaris company chaplain that comes free if you subscribe. He's a fantastic looking miniature, and with this little package you basically get a leaflet, the sprue and the base. So as ever, I'm going to snip him from his sprue, clean him up and stick him together. Now, you don't need to stick him together with glue if you don't want to, because he is a push fit model. However, I am going to stick him together with glue just to make sure he's a little bit more secure than he normally would be. So rather than just a quick overview and just painting him up to the standard that I usually would do for the Combat Patrol videos, I'm going to fully paint him up and give a little tutorial on how I've done it, as quite frankly he's a lovely little model and he's not going to take too long whatsoever. So unlike other issues and videos for Combat Patrol where I normally paint just along with the paint guide, I'm just going to do a full paint guide for this, guys. You don't actually get any paint guides for him whatsoever. So the very first thing I've done is sprayed him with some Macragge blue spray. So I'm going to stick to all the colours that you actually get with the magazine. Some of these colours you don't have yet, but you will get them in the future. First thing I've done is paint all the undersuit with some Abaddon black. Then I use the lead belcher to paint any silver areas. And then Catachan flesh to paint the belt that's around his waist. I then use some Nuln oil to recess shade all of the blue armour. Take your time with this, and don't worry if you make any mistakes, you can always clean it up later with a little bit of Macragge blue. I also then wash the Catachan flesh and the lead belcher with that same Nuln oil. Then, to edge highlight all of that armour, I use some Calgar blue. Take your time with this and make sure you've thinned down your paint enough so it just is almost translucent when you put it on. If it's too translucent, don't worry about it, you can always do more than one coat. Then we're going to relayer the Catachan flesh on the belt. And to highlight, we're going to use some Night Questor flesh. Once again, make sure you thin down your paint. I'm going to give his sword a second coat of Nuln oil, as I want that to be a little bit darker than the rest of the silver. So moving on to the loincloth and the paper parchments of the purity seals, I'm going to use some Rakarth flesh. And then for the wax seals of the purity seals, I'm going to use some Screamer pink. Then both the Screamer pink and the Rakarth flesh will receive a wash with some Agrax Earthshade. Once that wash is dried, I'm going to relayer the Rakarth flesh, making sure I avoid any of the recesses. I'm then going to use a 50-50 mix of Rakarth flesh and Pallid Witch flesh for the first highlight. Now, normally when I'm painting, I use a 50-50 mix just to get a little bit of a smoother transition from one colour to the highlight. However, that's completely optional for you, and if you don't want to do that, you can just dive straight into the Pallid Witch flesh and use the edge of the brush to give the cloth an edge highlight. And don't forget to also highlight those purity seals. Moving on to the gold, for that I'm going to use the Retributor armour. And all that gold will receive a wash with some Reichland flesh shade. And while that dries, I'm going to relayer the Screamer pink. And then I'll highlight the Screamer pink with some pink horror. Then I'm finally going to move back to the silver, and I'm going to relayer the lead belcher. This will be followed by a 50-50 mix of lead belcher and Stormhost silver. And then finally Stormhost silver just by itself. And as I've got the Stormhost silver out, I'm very carefully going to paint all those rivets that are dotted on the armour. Once the wash on the gold has dried, I'm just going to simply relayer the Retributor armour. Make sure you take your time and avoid all those recesses. There are some beads that need painting on the champion's hand, so for that I'm going to use some Corax white. I'll then wash that with some Nuln oil. So to paint the handle of the sword, I'm going to use Mephiston red. And I'm also going to use it to very carefully paint his lenses on his helmet. Then for the laurel on his helmet, I'm going to use some Skarsnik green. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure if this is a paint you get with the set, but you should do because we've got orcs coming up. I'll then wash both the green and the red with some Agrax Earthshade. Once that wash has dried, I'm going to relayer the Skarsnik green, but I'm mostly just going to be at the very tips of the laurel. After that, I'll relayer the Mephiston red. And to highlight the red, I'm going to use some Wild Rider red. Then I'm going to use a tiny bit of white scar just at the back of the lenses to represent a little bit of reflection. Next up, we're going to add some Astro Granite to the base. Once the Astro Granite has dried, I'm then going to paint that little bit of rock that he's standing on with some Dawnstone. I'm not entirely sure if you actually get Dawnstone with this set, but it's always worth picking up some Dawnstone as you're going to use it quite a lot. I'll then use some Rakarth Flesh to give the whole base a quick dry brush. Paint the rims of the base with some Abaddon Black. And then finally, wash the base with a little bit of watered down Agrax Earthshade. Once that wash has dried, that's him finished. However, he's not completely finished, as you can add extra stuff like transfers and little clumps of grass, so that's what we're going to do now. So you're not going to get any transfers in this set for anything, but you can quite easily find them on eBay, or you'll get some as soon as you buy your first pack of Space Marines. So for this guy, I'm going to cut out one Ultramarine symbol, a skull to go on the side, and I'm also going to cut out a little number 3 so I can put that on the actual skull. If you've never used transfers before, they're very easy to use. All you need to do is use a hobby knife and a cutting mat to cut out your selected transfers. Then take a plate and a bit of tissue paper, wet the tissue paper, and then place the transfers on top of the tissue paper. I find this method the easiest way to do it, as it's a lot easier to keep control of your transfers. They used to recommend putting it in some actual water, but I wouldn't recommend doing that because your transfer normally just floats off away and is very hard to get back hold of. So add a little bit of water to where you want to place your transfer. This will help move the transfer in place so it's not going to immediately stick to the model. Then use a pair of tweezers and an old brush to place the transfer. And once you've got your transfer on the model, all you need to do is use that brush to move the transfer in the desired place. It's very easy to do because you place that water. If it does become a little bit stuck, just grab a little bit of extra water on that brush to make it easier to move again. Now, Space Marine shoulder pads are not the best for putting transfers on, and there will be areas that stick up. But fear not, we do have ways of actually combating that. Now I suggest, or recommend, I should say, that you pick up some decal softener wires from Revel. It's quite handy, it comes with a little brush on the end. And all you need to do is simply give the transfer a coat. Make sure the transfer is dry though, as you can accidentally move it while you're doing it, if not like I did. To be honest, I was just a little bit impatient. I wanted to get the model done because I think he's an absolutely fantastic model. Of course, we're not quite done yet. We're going to add a little bit more stuff that doesn't come with the Combat Patrol. And what I'm going to add is a couple of static grass clumps. These come in all different shapes, all different sizes, and they're very easy to pick up anywhere. All you need to do is add a tiny little bit of glue on the base, and then quite simply push a static grass clump, and that's a mouthful, onto your base. Once that's dry, that's this guy finished. An absolutely fantastic model. Brilliant value as well, considering he's free if you've subscribed. If not, I'm not entirely sure if you can actually even pick this guy up. I think he might be actually exclusive to Combat Patrol. The only problem is using him in games of Combat Patrol, as you don't actually get a data sheet with him. So he's just a pretty model until you actually get your hands on a Space Marine Codex. At the moment though, he is a perfect way of honing your skills for painting with this stuff, especially if you're new. He's a really simple and easy model to paint. He doesn't take too long whatsoever. In fact, it only took me about 3 hours in total to get this guy finished. And honestly, most of that is just the edge highlighting of the armor. Well, thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more Combat Patrol videos, give the channel a subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye for now.